frightening commute home after a train derails near the end of rush hour.
We did have no life-threatening or critical injuries.
Right now, we're investigating a safety issue. What happened today and why?
TTC officials piecing together what caused the derailment that prompted a mass evacuation of all 44 people on board and sent 5 people to hospital. We'll bring you the latest from Ellesmere Station.
She's pronounced deceased at the hospital.
Plus, a 24-year-old was killed tonight in Etobicoke. We'll get you the latest on the police investigation into the shooting at Kipling and the Queensway.
I could feel something heavy inside of me and I cried.
And the journey of healing in Hamilton. The Inuit elders returning to a site that treated people with tuberculosis in the 50s and 60s. How that treatment turned into decades of trauma. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. We begin with several developing stories tonight, starting in Scarborough, and a scary situation for some transit riders. A train on Line 3 was traveling southbound near Ellesmere Station when the rear car separated from the rest of the train and derailed. Now, thankfully, no one was seriously injured, though 5 people were taken to hospital with minor injuries. Officials at the scene tonight acknowledged the outcome could have been much worse.
This could have been a different story tonight, and we are just all very fortunate that it did not happen that way.
5 people went to the hospital with minor injuries. You know, we're very fortunate. You know, again, I go back to safety is paramount to everything we do in public transit, and we'll never sidestep that.
All 44 people were forced from the train in a hurried mass evacuation, but we don't know yet what caused it to derail. The TTC CEO has ordered an immediate review of the incident and directed that trains on Scarborough's Line 3 will be fully replaced by buses until such time as the Transit Authority determines it is safe to resume service. The Scarborough RT is set to be fully decommissioned this fall due to outdated infrastructure. And we are live tonight at Kipling Avenue and the Queensway in Etobicoke. A large police presence there after a 24-year-old man was shot and killed inside an apartment building. Police were called to the scene at around 7:15 tonight, and they found the man with life-threatening injuries. He was rushed to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Here's more from police on what we know so far.
This appears to be a targeted shooting, given that the individuals entered the apartment, selected a very specific location, and enter that unit where this individual was essentially murdered. There's no ongoing threat to the community, as this is an isolated incident, albeit that the fact that the suspects are outstanding.
Police are searching for 2 male suspects. A firearm was seized at the scene, and anybody with information is asked to contact investigators. And in the city's East End, a new vigil tonight near Danforth and Carlaw. That is where a 29-year-old man was shot and killed over the weekend after an altercation involving several people. Toronto police today identified the man as Shamar Powell Flowers. As Dale Manukduk reports, the shooting is reigniting calls for action on gun violence.
Maybe he's just taking down your hours of operation.
Lori Parker is looking at Sunday morning security footage from outside her store. A police officer appears to be canvassing the neighborhood. It happened shortly after when police say a deadly shooting took the life of 29-year-old Shamar Powell Flowers. Hours before, at a nearby park, dozens gathered to mark the 5-year anniversary of the Danforth mass shooting.
Everybody still feels the pain from the Danforth shooting that happened 5 years ago. It's always on our minds, and for this to happen in just the next day within 24 hours was really, really sad.
Police say that around 3:30 Sunday morning, there was an altercation involving several people that resulted in the fatal shooting. Meanwhile, in the city's North End near Jane Street and Shoreham Drive, another man suffered life-threatening injuries after being shot late Saturday night. And earlier that night in Brampton, a man was gunned down on the St. Roche Catholic Secondary School grounds.
Well, I think we have to get a handle on gun control.
I think gun violence in general in Toronto is way up, especially post-COVID.
While it may seem to some that gun violence is out of control, the numbers paint a different picture. According to Toronto Police data, shootings or firearm discharges have noticeably declined in 2023 compared to the previous 4 years. Year-to-date, total shootings and firearm discharges are down 26% compared to 2022. Fatal shootings are down 46%.
I'm loving the fact that the numbers are down, and I want to give credit to the organizations that are out there working hard to, stop this violence.
Marcel Wilson heads one of the organizations fighting gun violence.
One thing we've noticed on our end is the brazenness of the shootings have increased. So there's an imbalance there, and it doesn't seem or feel to the people in the city like a lot is happening, though the numbers are going down.
Marcel Wilson's organization, the One by One movement, works with at-risk youth to prevent them from or get them out of a life of gangs and gun violence. He's calling on a more equitable funding strategy for organizations like his. As for the 3 shooting incidents this weekend, police have not made any arrests and are asking the public for any information to come forward. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to an ongoing investigation in Peel, and police now treating the death of a Mississauga woman as a homicide. Investigators say they found the victim dead in her apartment last week after being called for a wellness check. Talia Ricci has the latest.
Peel police say they were called to this apartment on Helene Street North in Port Credit last Thursday to conduct a wellness check. Inside, they found 21-year-old Pitch Foompa dead.
She was in a body bag. They removed that. Special constables were here in this location all night long to watch the scene. And then the mobile crime van and the forensic unit came back the next day.
I was walking the dog and I saw about 9 police cars and a bunch of detectives walking around asking people questions.
Police are investigating Foompa's death as a homicide. They believe the death may have taken place between July 17th and 18th. Police have not released any information on what led to her death or a description of any suspects. Neighbors say Foompa was kind and quiet. Some didn't want to go on camera out of fear for their safety.
She's just very sweet, very smart. We talked about books a lot. Just shocking.
She seemed a very nice girl. She's innocent.
Foompa's death comes as advocates are sounding the alarm on the rise of gender-based violence. Last month, a report by the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses found Ontario saw 30 femicides in 30 weeks from November to June. Residents in the area are also noting more violent incidents overall, which has them feeling uneasy.
The last couple of weeks, shootings, I'll just be right there and I'll hear shots happen and I'll think it's nothing, a car backfiring, and then you'll see police all around, and it's and then you find out there's drive-bys.
And then down the street here, about 5-minute walk, was another murder by the lake. So it's getting bad.
I was pretty shaken up, and it's too close to home, way too close to home. It makes me wonder about walking my dog late at night now.
Anyone with information about the case is asked to contact police or Crime Stoppers. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
To political news now, and Toronto receiving some news from the federal government today. In a letter to the mayor, the Deputy Prime Minister rejected a request for funding that would help fill a hole in the city's budget. Tyler Cheese has the latest reaction on the decision tonight.
It was quite disappointing to hear that from Minister Freeland.
Progress Toronto reacting to the Deputy Prime Minister's rejection of the city's request for funding. The political organization says the city needs the money to help with the ongoing crisis of asylum seekers, many who have been stuck on the street and in limbo due to a lack of city shelter spaces.
We know that refugee resettlement and settlement and immigration actually squarely falls within the federal jurisdiction.
But in a letter addressed to Mayor Olivia Chow, Chrystia Freeland refused the request, saying the ability of the federal government to spend is not infinite, adding the province of Ontario has both the constitutional responsibility and the fiscal capacity to support Toronto.
We're pleased that the federal government isn't offering Toronto a get out of jail free card on this. Taxpayers in Windsor shouldn't be subsidizing Toronto's spending dreams, and taxpayers in Saskatoon definitely shouldn't be.
In response, Chow released a statement saying the province has been a good partner so far in her tenure as mayor, also saying she's hopeful the federal government will still support the city. Premier Doug Ford's office also released a statement outlining the billions in funding that the province has provided to help the city address its COVID-19 shortfall. Freeland's letter also suggested the city tap its own reserve funds to solve the problem.
There is a $1.5 billion hole there.
But this political scientist says tapping the reserve fund would leave the city with no savings.
The city has enough reserves for $1.5 billion. That's what's available, that's not allocated. And once that is spent, the cupboard would be bare. The piggy bank is gone.
He says the city could look into creative ways to make up that money, like charging drivers for congestion or introducing additional fees in big box parking lots, adding that all levels of government need to come together to address what he calls an outdated and untenable financial situation in cities across the country.
Toronto, like all large Canadian municipalities, just doesn't have enough stable, renewable revenue to meet their expenses.
And that means the federal government will likely need to prepare for similar requests from other major cities across our region and the country. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
21 degrees and clear right now as we look live at the skyline, but fog is expected to develop overnight. Let's get to Colette now with a first look at the forecast. And Colette, a calmer evening to be sure after yet another summer storm whipped through the region this afternoon.
And that's right, Chris. Another busy day in the Weather Center with lots of active weather. We had it yesterday as well, and things calming down now. Just a few isolated showers here or there, kind of the remnants of what's left behind. Just looking at your almanac, so the record high, we know we weren't there, but we are going to find the temperatures climbing a little bit over the next few days in our low. But in terms of the normals, if we check those out, so this time of year, a normal daytime high, 27, and just checking out the daytime highs we've seen, we did pop up to 28 degrees, but pretty close to seasonal, and that's what will be sort of changing. It's not only the temperatures of the next few days, but the humidity will be building as well. And then just looking ahead, I mentioned a few little remnants, so a few sprinkles kind of here or there through the overnight, a little bit of patchy fog in a few areas as well. That's possible in the southwestern Ontario too. And then tomorrow, sunshine. Yes, will a few things bubble up? But very, very few, and not as active as what we saw this afternoon. So we should be doing okay. 18 tonight, 28 tomorrow, feeling like 33. And Chris, when I come back, I'll show you where those temperatures are headed.
That looks better than okay. Okay, thanks, Colette. To Hamilton now, and a group of Inuit elders visited a place where hundreds of Indigenous people sick with tuberculosis were shipped in the 1950s and 60s. It was a site meant for treatment, but it led to decades of trauma many are still carrying to this day. Megan Fitzpatrick was there for the emotional journey.
This has been an emotional trip for these elders who have come back to the site of the former sanatorium in Hamilton, where some of them were sent decades ago, and for some of them, they've never been here since then. And they wanted to come on this trip as part of a healing journey and to give them some closure and to fully understand what happened to them and their families decades ago. That building first opened in 1906, and initially it treated members of the Canadian military who had TB and others. But then starting in the 1950s, that sanatorium was used to treat Inuit who had been shipped to Hamilton from their home communities. And this was a traumatizing experience for them and their families. Some who boarded a ship called the C.D. Howe weren't allowed off of it once they tested positive for TB. They had no chance to say goodbye to their families because communication was so poor. Their families then had no idea where their loved ones had gone. For some of them, they were gone for a year, 2, 3 years, and their families had no idea where they were. Some did not survive, and some of those TB patients who died at the Hamilton Sanatorium are now buried here at this cemetery in nearby Burlington, Woodland Cemetery. And there's a memorial here now marking those lives that were lost. We've been speaking to some of the survivors who came to see it for themselves. There are some family members here as well whose relatives were patients at the Hamilton Sanatorium. They've told us what a difficult time it was for them and their families.
This morning, a few hours I woke up, I really got emotional. I was even crying. And when we got here, it was, I could feel something heavy inside of me, and I cried. I was really crying.
Feel release from I cannot describe it from what, and at the same time thinking of my late father.
Why was it important for you to come back and see it?
To do the healing and stuff like that, and which is good.
So one of the women we spoke to, her father was sent to the Hamilton Sanatorium when she was just 7 months old, and then her mother was sent away as well. That meant her and her siblings ended up being separated and cared for by relatives while both of their parents were far, far away from home. Another gentleman we talked to was 10 years old when he was sent to the Hamilton Sanatorium with his father initially, but then they were separated once they arrived there. He went months without seeing his father. So it's been emotional. There have been tears shed, hugs shared, people supporting each other. There are counselors accompanying the group on this trip. There are going to be some healing circles and workshops as part of this journey as well. For some of them, they're saying they're happy to be here, but it also brings back a lot of sad memories for them and their families. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC.
Welcome back. CBC Toronto has learned that police are laying fewer careless driving charges each year, and the ones that are being laid are being dropped more frequently. Some are calling it a broken system that isn't holding offenders to account or providing justice to victims. Angelina King explains why.
This is the bike that I was riding when I was in the collision.
Meredith Wilkinson hasn't seen that bike since she was last riding it, when she was hit in a bike lane by a garbage truck driver 6 years ago.
The handlebars had come right off. They had been snapped right off.
She was pinned underneath the truck's tire and dragged. She lost her right leg.
An injury of this degree really impacts every single facet of your life.
The driver was charged with careless driving at the scene, but Wilkinson says paperwork wasn't filed correctly, so the case couldn't proceed.
There was no closure. It can be demoralizing. It's disappointing. You feel let down, and it's not fair.
There are thousands of other people in Ontario who likely share that same sentiment, not because of a clerical error like Wilkinson, but because the charge in their case got dropped. Data shows the number of careless driving charges that are withdrawn before the case gets to trial has been increasing. Last year, that happened more than 6,500 times.
Between 2015 and 2022, the number of careless driving charges that were withdrawn before trial rose by 374%, and 35% of all careless driving charges that were dealt with last year were withdrawn before trial.
They're behind the eight ball with a massive backlog of cases. Every once in a while, you'll see a purge, and I believe it's in an effort to catch up.
Both City of Toronto and provincial lawyers prosecute Highway Traffic Act charges, but careless driving offences are largely handled provincially. Both the city and province say they can't comment specifically on outcomes.
It's a system that has been overburdened.
Personal injury lawyer Patrick Brown says the pandemic only made things worse and that the province needs more prosecutors with more resources.
The entire system seems to be handcuffed against having any real conclusion to these charges that could send any meaningful deterrent.
The Ministry of the Attorney General says its existing framework focuses on changing offenders' behavior and making roads safer.
This is a lot of damage.
Because Wilkinson lost her leg, she had to undergo driver retraining, but the man who hit her did not.
It's just shocking that a driver who did that to me, they would not have to do that sort of driver retraining as of right now.
That's why Wilkinson is advocating for a bill introduced by the NDP that would create tougher penalties for drivers convicted of injuring or killing a pedestrian, road worker, or cyclist, including a suspended license until the driver completes a re-education course and community service with a road safety group.
It's more reformative. It's just about making better drivers, making it safer out there for vulnerable road users.
The bill passed first reading last fall. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, Colette is back. And Colette, I know that sweltering heat is going to be building back up here in our region through the week.
Yeah, Chris, we've kind of been seeing temperatures at least kind of close to seasonal, but not that real heat when so many other parts of North America have really been baking. And I'm not saying we want that, but we are going to find the temperatures coming up a little bit. We still have a few isolated pop-ups tomorrow, but just a few, nothing like we saw today or yesterday even. And when those temperatures are building towards midweek, we're also going to find the humidex values going up. By the end of the week, they'll be approaching those upper 30s, and some of that humidity then with the cold cold front moving in will bring more organized line of storms at the end of the week. And I can kind of show you the progression of that heat. So you see that warmer stuff into the prairies, central Canada. This is for tomorrow. We're still doing fine, close to seasonal, those upper 20s. And then Wednesday, it's creeping our way. So we see, a 30 on the board. Thursday, still into the heat, more and more humidity as the dew points rise. And then here we are Friday, and notice the cool down back to the west, but not only there, into northern Ontario. And that's going to be that boundary. As that cold front drops, that will provide some lift, and we get into some storms at the end of the week that could be, again, on the stronger side. Overnight tonight, we just had a few little remnant showers kind of left behind from the activity earlier. Look how few the pop-ups will be tomorrow. Mostly it's going to be a dry day. But things change over as we get towards Wednesday. So into the afternoon hours Wednesday through southwestern Ontario, again, we get into some showers and thunderstorms. I think we'll stay mostly dry through Wednesday. In fact, sunny in the GTA. It's Wednesday overnight into Thursday. The chance for some of that active weather and the plants to get watered once again. Little patchy fog development, 17 all around for the overnight lows. In southwestern Ontario, a little bit more of a range here tonight. A stray shower, just what's kind of left from earlier in the day. And then look at those temperatures climbing up, Chris, over the next few days, keeping in mind tomorrow the humidex around 33, but then after that it's mid 30s to upper 30s.
Yikes, that is hot. All right, thanks, Colette. That's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Maribel Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night.